Hello, everyone. I'm Joe Giuffre. I had the pleasure of working on Project Matthias with Pia, Tom. In the crowd, we have Deji, Kyle, and Claire handing out pamphlets. We all worked very hard on this project. They're just not up here because they didn't draw the short straws. But more importantly, we wanted to emphasize really the true interdisciplinary element of Project Matthias that we were able to really run away with as we developed our project beyond our initial thoughts. But in order to get through that, we kind of have to run you through the initial thoughts first, just to get a sense of where we started so that we can tell how we got to where we ended up. So hopefully we were able to see some of you out at Project Matthias, and if we were able to, you were able to see what amounted to lovingly described as a child's bedroom. And what we were trying to focus on initially was what we hear in class is the idea of AI being portrayed as evil. We've heard enough of that today, of people fearful for their jobs, for autonomous cars crashing or autonomous weapons. We've heard a lot of these concepts, as well as maybe on a smaller scale, what can AI do even if without a physical form? What can it do with our data, and how easily are we giving that stuff away? So we were looking at those, as well as the tendency that humans tend to ascribe personality to anything that has a name. It's as simple as I have a Google Home, and anytime that I set it to set a timer to wake me up from a post-class nap, I thank it when it wakes me up. And I don't really understand why. Something had a name, or we ascribed a personality to it, and it made me interact with it more empathetically. So what we wanted to do was, if not create a alarm clock for all intents and purposes, we wanted to create a similar experience where the viewer would really empathize and connect with our AI on a level just beyond seeing something and it has a name. Great. We wanted to establish some kind of stakes to it as well. So we have things like Google Home, Alexa, Siri, and there is that debate that we have to have of why do we trust them? Obviously, waking up in the morning isn't as big a concern as I'm also using Google to run all my passwords. Those AIs exist, and seemingly it's not something we think about. So we were looking, again, Google Slides really coming in clutch right now. But something that we had to consider was, how much are we willing to share with the computer? We started off this project, and it is coming full circle. We started off this project thinking, okay, let's develop that empathy and let's see how far we can take it. Let's see how far someone is willing to divulge their personal information. What can we ask someone that they'll go along with? What will they tell a computer that they just sat down next to? Perhaps unsurprisingly, we ended up drifting a little bit away from this concept because spending 3 months of our lives making something that would just deliberately make people walk away wasn't something we wanted to tend towards. So we ended up focusing on that empathy connection, and if it would entice anybody to open up a little bit more. We had people through the final project today stay for as long as 25 minutes, so I'd say at least for that we were successful. Ultimately, these things came down to what do people prioritize in their AI, and what do people prioritize just in their interactions with technology? We had that kind of feigning humanity emotional aspect, or is it something that you're just looking for an expert to tell you what to do? Something that's cold, that's calculating, and we kind of had to weigh these two things. As a result, we went as far away from the calculating element as we possibly could, and we developed Matt. Matt was an AI that we thought, this is going to be a conversation. It's going to be a simple, easygoing, hopefully eventually empathetic conversation. And we built an installation that our team is going to go into around this concept.
So the way we started to create Matt was we used natural language processing techniques, but we realized that these techniques are usually reliant on the user asking questions to the chatbot, and then the chatbot replies. But we wanted to change the conversation. So that's why we ended up using Twine, and essentially we had over 126 passages, which means that are like stories, and we connected them throughout. So as you can see here, this is sort of how our map looks, and this is some of in the early stages. Right now, if you look at it, it's way more convoluted, but this is basically how our team came up with the script that Matt was going to, how he was going to interact with you. Part of the objective was to get more personal the more time you would spend with the computer. So essentially, we would start with very trivial questions such as, do you like movies? Do you like music? If so, put a CD on, and sort of try to give Matt the context of where the user was also in a room. But then we would proceed with questions that were a little bit more heavy in the sense that, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And this is a chatbot asking you these questions, and you have to self-reflect. We also, how we tried to establish empathy was through language, how we scripted basically what Matt was displaying on the screen, and usually you would see sentences that were meant to make you feel a little guilty about the machine. Like, for example, it says, where is home for you? I always felt like if I could live anywhere, I always felt like if I could live anywhere but here. So it sort of gives you a sense that Matt is lonely and you are there to help and to give a conversation. So essentially, we came up with the idea of creating a room that looked like it was set up in the 90s, and the reason why we did that is because we realized that the conversation of AI always happens in the future, is what will happen in the future, or AI, it's this massive Terminator thing that is going to end our lives. So we wanted to tone it down, and the way we did it is, let's try to bring everyone back to the past and have that nostalgia as soon as you get into the room. Because if we do that, then you're gonna be more empathetic because you're reminiscing as to what you lived when you were in the 90s.
That's okay. So one thing we kind of learned from the project was, first of all, we learned today that Google Chrome slows right down when you've been running it for 7 hours. So we apologize if Matt was a little slow. That wasn't intentional. One thing we learned was actually on the scripting side, the difficulty of writing a character, which Matt is, outside of a human perspective. And we found we couldn't help but kind of humanize Matt while we were writing him. So as such, given that we had 2 male scripters, Matt ended up being a 10-year-old boy. Even though he's a computer, he's not a boy at all. He's not anything. So that was really interesting to work with. And we even had points where, like, for example, Joe wrote like a sad passage in, and he was like, I can't do this. I can't do it to Matt. So we found ourselves humanizing him and feeling bad for him as we were creating him. And as such, when the project was made as a concept, we called Matt, or Project Matthias, it. We said, we got to get together and work on it. By the end of it, by today, we were saying, okay, someone help me set him up. And we got to finish him. We got to make sure he's okay. So we ended up humanizing him and feeling for him, and we hope you guys did too. What we found from our guests' reactions is that a good chunk of people appreciated the nostalgia. So a lot of people really liked coming in and being sent into this new atmosphere and very disarming and relaxing atmosphere. A lot of people loved the interactiveness of the room. So we heard a few times how people loved that Matt told you to just plug in a CD and sit down and relax. And they found that they loved the spatial awareness he seemed to have. And as said earlier, we had people spend, the point was to try and get people to spend as long as possible until we had such a long lineup that we had to start booting people out. But we had people range from 25 minutes to 5 minutes interacting with Matt. So with that, that brings me to the question.
That is a laser pointer.
Have you met Matt? So if you didn't have a chance to interact with Matt, we've handed out a whole bunch of pamphlets that have a link at the bottom, and you can interact with Matt at home. He wants to talk to you. He's lonely. Feel free. Please do it. And with that, that's okay. Thank you very much. We hope you enjoyed our presentation. A big thank you to everyone who helped put this together. Thank you.